The Tejas Mk2 is finally taxiing down the runway, preparing for its maiden flight. This is a total radical redesign, aimed at producing a 4.5 generation medium-weight brawler. It features a new aerodynamic layout, a massive American engine deal that marks a historic shift in US-India relations, and a political mandate to be the crown jewel of the Make in India initiative. The original Tejas Mk1A is a single-engine, tailless delta-wing light fighter. It is highly agile at high speeds, but the tailless delta design suffers from poor low-speed maneuverability and requires a massive runway for takeoff and landing. More importantly, it is simply too small to carry the heavy fuel and heavy weapons required to dominate a modern battle space. The Indian Air Force needed a medium-weight fighter, so the Aeronautical Development Agency and Hindustan Aeronautics Limited didn't just give the Tejas a facelift, they completely tore the aircraft down to the studs. The Tejas Mk2 officially graduates the program into the medium-weight fighter club. The fuselage has been lengthened by 1.4 meters, and the wingspan increased by 0.3 meters. The maximum takeoff weight has ballooned from 13.5 tons to 17.5 tons. But the most glaring, visually obvious change is right behind the cockpit. The Mk2 features fully moving canards. Adding canards to a delta wing changes the aerodynamics entirely. The canards generate additional lift and create high-energy vortices over the main wing. This drastically improves the jet's low-speed handling, increases its high angle of attack capability for close-in dogfighting, and significantly shortens the distance it needs to take off and land. It is a massive aerodynamic upgrade. But a heavier jet requires a much bigger heart to push it through the sky. The indigenous Kaveri engine project famously failed to produce the thrust required for modern fighters. As a result, the original Tejas Mk1A relied on the American-made General Electric F414 engine. However, severe delivery delays of those F404 engines created a massive bottleneck. Some of the fighter jets produced were delivered to the Indian Air Force without even being equipped with engines, severely stalling the Air Force's modernization schedule. For the heavier Mk2, India needed more thrust, and they needed absolute supply chain security. They found the thrust in the General Electric F414 GEINS-6. This is the exact same ultra-reliable turbofan that powers the US Navy's A-18 Super Hornet, generating an impressive 22,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner. In a first-of-its-kind agreement in the history of US-India relations, Washington approved a massive military technology transfer. General Electric signed an agreement with HAL to transfer 80% of the intellectual property and manufacturing rights for the F414 engine directly to India. Why only 80%? Because the remaining 20% of the intellectual property is owned by various other highly classified US defense subcontractors. Under this agreement, HAL will construct a brand new facility in India with GE's direct assistance, aiming to begin domestic production within 2 years. The initial order is for 99 F414 engines, with massive follow-on orders expected. This deal is an absolute masterstroke for New Delhi. It completely eliminates the crippling supply chain vulnerability that plagued the Mk1A. The Tejas Mk2 now has a guaranteed, domestically produced, combat-proven American heart. Because of the larger airframe and the massive increase in thrust from the F414 engine, the Tejas Mk2's payload capacity has nearly doubled. Internal fuel capacity has increased from 2.4 tons to 3.3 tons, giving the jet the deep strike legs the Air Force desperately needs. Furthermore, the number of external hardpoints has increased to 11. The total weapon and fuel payload capacity has skyrocketed from around 3.5 tons to 6.5 tons, and the weapons they plan to put on those 11 hardpoints are incredibly lethal. The Mk2 will be armed with the indigenous Astra Beyond Visual Range air-to-air missile. The Astra Mk1 boasts a range of 110 kilometers, while the Mk2 variant utilizes a dual-pulse solid rocket motor to hit targets at 160 kilometers, putting it in the same class as the American AIM-120 AMRAAM. India is also aggressively testing the Astra Mk3, a solid-fuel ramjet variant designed to snipe enemy AWACS and tanker planes from 300 kilometers away. For ground attack, it will carry the BrahMos NG. The original BrahMos supersonic cruise missile was devastating, but it was massive, so heavy that only customized Su-30 MKIs could carry it. The BrahMos NG shrinks the missile down to 5 meters in length and 1.5 tons in weight, making it perfectly suited for the Tejas Mk2. Crucially, The NG variant features radar-absorbent coatings and a new AESA seeker, allowing the Mark II to unleash Mach 3, highly accurate, unjammable strikes against enemy bunkers and radar sites. But a missile is only as good as the radar that guides it, and this is where the Make in India dream hits a massive snag. The original plan was for the Tejas Mk2 to feature the domestically built UTUM AESA radar. On paper, the upgraded UTUM sounds fantastic. 992 transmit-receive modules, a tracking range of 150 kilometers, and the ability to simultaneously track 50 targets and engage 4. The problem? It isn't ready. Like many ambitious Indian defense projects, the UTUM radar has been plagued by severe developmental delays and reliability concerns. In fact, in 2025, the Indian Air Force became so frustrated with the delays that HAL was forced to abandon the UTUM for the initial batches of the Tejas Mk1A, pivoting instead to import the Israeli ELM 2052 AESA radar, just to get the planes flying. While the ADA insists the UTUM will be ready for the Mark II, many people remain highly skeptical. The integration of a complex AESA radar with advanced digital flight controls and electronic warfare suites is notoriously difficult. If the UTUM fails testing, India will once again be forced to rely on Israeli or French imports, undercutting the aircraft's 70% indigenous target. Despite the radar concerns, the physical aircraft is coming to life. In August of last year, the project transitioned from blueprints to physical metal. Right now, in mid-2026, the Tejas Mk2 is deep into the ground validation phase. Engineers are currently verifying the structural integrity of the lengthened fuselage, testing the integration of the American F414 engines, and certifying the complex new fly-by-wire software required to manage the unstable aerodynamics of the added canards. Once these static tests clear, the jet will begin high-speed taxi trials, running down the runway at near takeoff speeds to test the brakes and aerodynamic responsiveness. If the math holds up, the ADA projects the Tejas Mk2 will take to the skies for its maiden flight by the middle of this year. But getting a prototype off the ground is the easy part. The true test of a military-industrial complex is mass production. The ADA plans to build 4 distinct prototypes between 2025 and 2027 to execute an incredibly aggressive, high-intensity flight testing regimen. The goal is to achieve final operational clearance by 2028, with HAL receiving mass production orders from the Air Force by 2030 or 2031. However, time is running out. Right across the border, the Pakistan Air Force is not waiting around. The direct peer-to-peer adversary for the Mark II is the J-10CE, currently being fielded in large numbers by Pakistan. The biggest advantage the J-10CE has, it exists right now. The Pakistan Air Force is currently flying them, training with them, and integrating them into their kill webs. The Tejas Mark II, conversely, is a prototype that won't see active squadron service until at least 2032. The Tejas Mark II represents an absolute do-or-die moment for the Indian military-industrial complex. If HAL and ADA can actually execute on this aggressive timeline, if they can successfully manufacture the American F414 engines domestically, and if they can finally get the UTUM radar to work reliably, the Tejas Mark II will be a phenomenal, highly lethal 4.5 generation fighter. It will perfectly bridge the gap between their heavy Su-30 MKIs and the upcoming AMCA 5th generation stealth fighter. But there is zero margin for error. The Indian Air Force is bleeding squadrons at a terrifying rate. If the Mark II program suffers the same catastrophic delays that plagued the Mark I, India will be forced into a corner. They will have to spend tens of billions of dollars to import even more foreign fighters, like the Rafale or the F-15EX, just to keep their airspace secure, completely undercutting the Make in India initiative. Therefore, 2026 will be the decisive year that reveals the answer for India's aviation industry.